Welcome back to Movement Project for another edition of Try It or Trash It, where we take a look at the MonkeyFeet to work on your hip flexor strengthening. The MonkeyFeet is made by Animalhouse Fitness. If we head over to their website, we can see their description that says, wish you could lift dumbbells with your feet like you can with your hands? Do that and much more with MonkeyFeet, the newest product from Animalhouse Fitness. Leg day will never be the same. When we open our box, you can see they include a nice carrying bag, so the box is basically unnecessary once you open your product. The other thing that they did a really nice job with is an instruction manual that is incredibly simple, but it's nice that it's not a 7-page document. At the bottom they show the 4 exercises that they recommend: hamstring curls, donkey kicks, leg extensions, and high knees, all of which we'll review along with some other tweaks, so make sure you watch to the end of the video. When we crack into the bag here and we take out the monkey foot, the first thing that stands out is how light this is. I believe it's about 1.5 pounds. I think their website says 1.2 pounds, and you can really tell that stands out, but it's also very sturdy. You can tell there's a lot of engineering that went into the stability and these bearings at the access points here, and a very sturdy strap. Okay, now I've been using this for about a month, so I'm going to get into the review of pros and cons and whether you should make the investment and try it or trash it. If we start off looking at the pros of the monkey foot, one of the things that jumps out is the cost. It all depends on what you're comparing it to. So if you're looking at this as a comparison to getting machines that you'll see in a gym, it's a significant cost savings. This is going to run you $74.95 plus shipping and tax, so you're probably in the mid-80 range, and you compare that to a multiple $1,000 piece of equipment in a gym for hip flexion or hamstring curls. So now if you compare it to just using some resistance bands, you may rank it as a con. You're going to be able to do some of the exercises you can do with the monkey foot, but not as well. So we'll get into that as we go through the video. One of the things that is really, really neat about this is you can use all different weights and interchange them pretty easily using the foot, the monkey foot here, that is able to grab on like our hand would be. So it opens and closes quite easily. One of the biggest pros in my opinion, and the reason I bought it, is because you can load this way heavier than you can with an ankle weight or resistance band. The manufacturer says directly on their website that you can load these up to 160-pound dumbbells. Now, I don't have 160-pound dumbbells, and I don't know who does, but it's nice to know that when you're testing it with higher weights like 40s and 50s, that you don't have to worry about it breaking, and they've tested it to those levels. Because of its light weight, it's incredibly easy to transport. You just pop it in your bag, and you can travel with it easily and do exercises from the comfort of your hotel room or wherever you may be traveling, as long as you just have a dumbbell to go with it. Another piece of the pricing issue is whether or not you already have dumbbells. If you already have dumbbells, then that makes it even more valuable than if you were to have to go out and buy dumbbells and the MonkeyFeet. One thing to keep in mind from a pricing standpoint is that these are sold individually and they're not sold in a pair. So if you're looking to buy 2, then you're going to be in the 160 range after taxes and shipping. One thing they do a great job of pointing out on their website, so you're not disappointed when the monkey foot arrives, is how big of a shoe and how wide of a shoe that this can accommodate. 3.3 inches wide, or 84 millimeters, is the max width, and a size 14 men's is the maximum size shoe that this will work with from a length standpoint. So I kind of found that out the hard way when I tried to use my Brooks running shoe in the monkey foot, which is obviously wider than 3.3 inches, and you can see here that does not sit down in this MonkeyFeet device. Okay, so I was forced to kind of switch shoes, my Nike training shoe, and you just pop it in there, okay, and then from there you can ratchet. There's a ratchet strap here. You can make it as tight as you like. Now, another one of the pros of this device that I love so much is it pretty much locks your ankle. If you do not have your ankle locked when you're doing some of the exercises, then you're going to get fatigue in your tib anterior muscle, which is going to tire out before you will with your hip flexors. That's the same thing that happens when you try to do this hip flexor lift with a kettlebell. Your tib anterior is far weaker than your hip flexor. That's going to fatigue first, and you're not going to get as good of a training response on your hip flexors as you would. So the fact that this locks your ankle when you're completely relaxed, my tib anterior doesn't have to do anything, and the hip can do all the work, is a huge benefit of the monkey foot. And when you're done your exercise, all you need to do is just pull this little lever and it pops right off. Okay, so it's very simple. I have noticed over the course of a month that these teeth in this strap almost kind of get stripped a little bit. You can see there that it doesn't want to stay locked in place. So that may be something that they need to work on, but eventually I get it locked in. It's just getting it started on those first few teeth where it seems to be having its issue. I have 4 different weights here. They're commonly used in household gyms. The first is this spin locking adjustable dumbbell, and it's snug, but the monkey foot does fit. Here, I ran into some trouble with this rubber handled grip. I just don't quite have the width. This handle is a little too wide around, and because of the angled rubber on the inside of the weight, the monkey feet don't quite capture that weight. And this is more of your classic hex dumbbell, and that goes on there no problem. That's probably the best possible scenario. Lastly, we have the Bowflex adjustable dumbbell, which I use all the time. And the monkey foot does go right on there. There's a little bit of left to right play, you can see. And that's due to the ergonomic handle of the Bowflex adjustable that's a larger diameter in the center than it is out on the sides. I haven't found there's any issues when I'm doing the exercise, and I'm just happy that it fits on there nicely. Let's take a look at each of the exercises they include in their pamphlet, along with some tweaks that I can show you to help you make more gains. One of the first ones that they include is the hamstring curl. Trying to bring the heel to your butt is going to flex your hamstring. Depending on what load you use, I'm only using about 6 to 7% of my body weight here for the demonstration, but I can still feel a pretty strong hamstring contraction when I do this. The key is to do the movement correctly, or else you're not going to get a good hamstring load. And what I mean is, the instant you start to bring your hip forward, that knee comes forward, you're decreasing that hamstring contraction probably by 50%. So one of the things we'll do with patients is block their thighs. We'll have you place both of your legs against a table or surface. So if I just place both of my thighs here and curl up, it gives me way more hamstring contraction. But you can see one of the problems is because of where this load, where this weight is positioned, it's very difficult to control and ends up resulting in some rotation force in your knee. Most machines at the gym are going to be resisted at the bottom of the thigh, and you can adjust that pad up or down to lessen the strain on the joint itself. We want to work the muscle without any unnecessary strain onto the knee joint. So that's my one gripe with this, where that load was positioned. Obviously it was an engineering thing for where they had to put it, but it makes it a little bit difficult. If it was anchored behind for the hamstring, it would be more effective. Now, when we go into the hip flexion, the position of the weight is great because it's right below your foot. So that line where I'm pulling this leg up, that is directly below that line of pull. So that's a perfect position for the hip flexion exercise. We think about that hamstring curl, it's way, way out when we talk about how that muscle is pulling, how that joint is moving. It's a lot of load on the joint, as opposed to, again, this straight below the joint, much less joint strain, assuming you're not overdoing the weight that you're trying to do here. Now, one of the problems with doing hip flexion is that you're starting, by the time you get tension in the muscle, you're already at about 30 degrees of hip flexion. So you've lost that chance to load the hip flexor from 0 to 30. So the way that you want to to counter that is by placing your other foot elevated. And every inch or two that I can lift the opposite leg off the ground is going to result in more work to the hip flexor in that early part of the range. We always want to work a muscle through the powerful range, which is what most exercises accomplish, but what most exercises miss is the lengthened range of a muscle and a shortened range of a muscle. And that's also coincidentally where a lot of injuries happen. So when we're standing, yes, we're taking that hip flexor up through the full range and shortening it on that side, but the other side is lengthened. So if we come into a sitting position, we have both hip flexors shortened, which is going to take the whole complex and make it much more difficult for it to contract because it's shortened on both sides. Your pelvis is rotated, which shortens that position to start. So you feel a completely different sensation when you're trying to do a seated hip flexion than you do when you have the standing hip flexion. The other thing you don't have that you have in standing is the other foot can't really drive down into the ground as much as when you're standing. You have your whole body weight going through. So after just a few repetitions, you're going to notice much more of a pull deep in that hip flexor area, and hopefully that helps you work that shortened range of that psoas muscle, that hip flexor, iliacus, iliopsoas, we call them together. Now to work our hip flexor in the lengthened position, because that muscle passes the hip joint and the hip flexor part of the quads, that rectus femoris runs down past the knee, we want to flex the knee at the same time. So what we're going to do is put our spine into a flat position on a bench or bed. Now this can give you a lot of trouble in your back if you don't do it correctly. So do not try this exercise if you have any back pain or if it causes you any discomfort, just stop immediately. But I'm tightening my abdominals to hold my pelvic angle, and then from there, I'm trying to take this lengthened hip flexor and just initiate that lift, keeping my back tight as I can. And again, feeling the hip flexor work in a much different way than it did with the classic standing hip flexion here. So using the shortened position and the lengthened position to kind of round out your workout, doing 5 to 10 reps on each would be a good way to help with injury prevention while you're doing the full range of motion and standing for strengthening. Another exercise recommended in the pamphlet is leg extensions using the MonkeyFeet. They have you trying to straighten and flexing the knee. Because of the position of that weight relative to the foot, there's more forces going on in the knee. So you're getting some strength benefit, yes, but you're also putting unnecessary strain and shearing forces on the joint, which is not what the joint's like. They're made to handle compression, not shearing. So I can already feel some discomfort from a few repetitions. Leg extension is not a great exercise in general unless you're just recovering from an injury and you're trying to build your quad strength back in isolation. It's not a functional movement and there is more shearing force. So by putting the load beyond the foot, definitely not an ideal scenario. As you can see also, I'm not going through very much range of motion. You're going to need to boost this up to get any reasonable range of motion or do it off the edge of your bed. Otherwise, you're just going through 30 to 40 degrees. So because of all these factors, I would not recommend the knee extension exercise from a physical therapist perspective using the MonkeyFeet. The other exercise shown in the pamphlet is the donkey kicks, which is essentially a hip extension with your knee flexed. I'm gonna ratchet my strap down pretty good here and extra tightening. And then, you know, we're starting in that kneeling position. You could do this on a bed. I like to do it off of a mat or a bed so that your ankles, your feet can hang down. If you're on the floor, you end up with the ankles pointed, and that's not gonna work at all with the monkey foot. So from here, and I'm trying to see, can I bring the back of my foot up to the ceiling? And same thing as the hamstring curl. You can see that weight wobbles a bit, which for this, I don't mind too much. It's actually a really good stability workout because it's forcing me to keep my hip rotation neutral, which is something that a lot of people struggle with. So from a low back and hip and pelvis stability exercise, I actually like this a lot. It challenges the back and the patient, the person doing the exercise, in a way that honestly I've never really felt before because of that load position. So the same reason that that load position is bad for the knee extension makes this actually a good exercise for the donkey kick, a good piece of equipment to use for the donkey kick. Now you're going to want to start really low on your weight until you can get a feel for that joint position sense and make sure that you're not causing yourself any harm. For the same reason that I'm not liking the knee extension with the monkey foot, I'm not liking the prone or on your stomach hamstring curl with the monkey foot. The weight is just too far away from the joint. It's putting too much shearing stress on the joint to get the muscle contraction that you're trying to improve. Now, if you wanted to load this really low and just work on joint awareness exercises at end range as you're recovering from an injury, that might be effective. But for just brute strengthening, it's not going to be the best exercise to do. The other issue with it is you're only resisting this first part of the load. As soon as you pass that line of gravity, now the weight's just whoop, bringing you into a stretch position, and you could get yourself into some trouble if you have any limitations in your knee bending, and it just forces you into knee flexion. So definitely want to be careful if you decide to do this prone hamstring curl exercise. In summary, to rank each of the exercises using the monkey feet, by far hip flexion is number 1, then donkey kick, then hamstring curls, and last is going to be knee extension, all in my opinion, of course. We're going to rate this as a try it for certain populations. If you're in a population that's looking to strengthen your hip flexors to improve your speed and to try to increase your vertical leaping, you definitely want to try the monkey feet. It's a great price for the outcomes that you can get and the unmatched resistance you can get loading this way heavier than any ankle weights or resistance band. So a definite try it for that group of people. If you're looking to replace an entire gym, you're probably going to be disappointed. I wouldn't say trash it by any means, but definitely temper your expectations and make sure that you know what you're getting into. Hopefully this review helps you make that decision. I'm not sponsored or affiliated with them in any way. I did put a link in the video description to make it easy for you guys to click through and check out their product. I obviously like it. I bought it myself with my own money, and I found it to be a very nice addition to my home exercise program. Help me on my mission to cut out unnecessary surgeries and opiate use by spreading the word and subscribing to my channel by clicking over here. To watch another video, to get you moving your best, click down here. Remember, if you want to keep improving, you got to keep it moving.